I'm Diane Reese, and I'm one of the project officers for the Gulf of Mexico Division. This presentation is focused on the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division's funding opportunity titled Gulf of Mexico Environmental Justice 2023 Request for Applications. From here forward, I will refer to this only as the RFA. The purpose of this presentation is to assist potential applicants to develop the best application they can. This presentation will highlight some information from the RFA and provide a strategy for getting started. This presentation should not be used in place of reading or following the instructions in the RFA, as this is not meant to be an all-encompassing presentation and only outlines portions of the RFA. This presentation will touch on the items listed here: the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division, what to know about this RFA, getting started, project narrative and tips, developing your budget table, the evaluation criteria, how to submit your application, the selection process, some helpful resources, and some questions. So what is the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division? GMD is one of EPA's great water body programs and is focused on the protection and restoration of the health and productivity of the Gulf of Mexico. GMD activities are centered around voluntary, partner-driven projects. All projects must take place in one of the geographic categories identified in the RFA and within the Gulf of Mexico watershed. The link to GMD's webpage is epa.gov/Gulf of Mexico. On this page, you can find a link to the story map pictured here on this slide and find information on previously funded projects. This RFA, as its name suggests, is focused on environmental justice. Definitions surrounding environmental justice can be found in Section 1A1 of the RFA. This funding opportunity is requesting applicants to demonstrate how they would undertake two different items. The first is to run a competitive subaward program, and this should take up the majority of the funding. Details of what are expected are outlined in Section 1B1 of the RFA. The other is to provide technical assistance to potential subaward applicants and subawardees. Details of the expected technical assistance program can be found in Section 1B2. So what to know about this RFA? EPA plans to provide no more than $2.5 million per award for up to 5 awards, one in each of the Gulf states. The map shown here shows the eligible locations for the projects. Specific counties eligible for subaward projects can be found in Appendix E of the RFA. While these are the eligible counties, subaward projects may only take place in one of the Gulf states. Applications that submit projects in more than one state will be rejected. So where should you start? First, read the RFA and ensure your project and your eventual application meet the requirements in the RFA. The RFA contains vital information that can improve scoring and quality of applications. Next, there are several items to confirm for your organization prior to starting your application. First, is your organization eligible? The list of eligible entities can be found in Section 3A of the RFA. Second, does your organization have experience running a competitive subaward program and the organizational infrastructure to manage these subawards in alignment with 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart D? Third, confirm your organization has a current registration with the System for Award Management at sam.gov, that they have a unique entity identifier, and are registered with grants.gov. This is extremely important since obtaining a UEI could take more than 30 days. Not obtaining these in time is not an allowable reason for a late application to be accepted, so please double check this as soon as possible. Plan your project. When developing your project idea, keep the following in mind. The project must meet the priorities of the funding opportunity for which you apply. The priorities can be found in Section 1B of the RFA. Any projects that do not meet this will be rejected. Your project must state how it is relevant to the Gulf of Mexico and the EPA Strategic Plan goals. EPA Strategic Plan linkage information can be found in Section 1C1. As you are planning your project, be sure to consider the potential outputs and outcomes you expect from your subrecipients and how those will be identified in your application. Writing the project narrative. After you've worked to develop the project and project details, you are ready to write your project narrative. To approach this, utilize the project narrative format found in Appendix C of the RFA. This provides a format for the summary information page and the project work plan. We suggest you use this format to ensure you cover everything that will be evaluated. Be sure to review the RFA for the full project narrative format and any cautionary information. As a side note, beyond the project narrative, there are other forms and documents required, including the budget table, shown on the next slide, and letters of support from partners. Please see Section 4B of the RFA for information on these items. Tips to keep in mind when writing your project narrative are: use succinct, meaningful sentences. Please do not include unnecessary or irrelevant information not requested in the contents of submission section, including the project narrative. Readability. Font should be no smaller than Calibri 11 point and margin should not be smaller than 1 inch. Project narrative should be a maximum of 12 pages. This includes 1 page for the summary information page and a project work plan of up to 11 pages. Please note that any excess pages will not be reviewed. Maps should be included at the end of the document and will not be counted against the 12-page limit for the project narrative. The project narrative environmental results section should adequately describe what can be anticipated from the project. Programmatic capability. This section should describe your experience working in the project's proposed geographic area and experience you have in managing a large subaward program. The budget narrative should only include information not easily understandable in the budget table or that requires additional information for a budget category. Examples are listed in Appendix C under Budget Narrative, but include things like description of the roles and responsibilities of the personnel, description of what supplies will be used for, description of why the purchase of equipment is preferable to rental of equipment, provide contract details such as whether it will be sole source or competed and why that choice was made, descriptions of activities of subawardees. You must describe each item in sufficient detail for EPA to determine cost effectiveness, reasonableness, and allowability of cost. Cost effectiveness will consider the organizational overhead and indirect cost and direct cost versus anticipated results. Just as a reminder, the budget narrative together with the budget table, described on the next slide, will be evaluated under the budget evaluation criteria found in Section 5A. So if you have a budget table but no narrative to explain items that are difficult to understand, you may be evaluated less favorably. Developing your budget table. On GMD's webpage, there is a link to a recommended budget table template that is pictured on this slide. Utilizing this template, in conjunction with the budget narrative, will ensure the application has all of the information needed to evaluate the budget proposed for the project. This budget table provides more details on the cost identified on the SF424A. The budget object class category amounts listed on your SF42A must match the budget object class category totals on your detailed budget table. For more information on developing your budget, please see EPA's Budget Development Guidance at epa.gov//2019-05//applicant-budget-development-guidance.pdf. Requested funding should be in alignment with anticipated results, meaning an applicant should not request the maximum amount just because the maximum amount is available. As we said on the previous slide, there are likely several categories in the budget table that you should include more detailed information for so they can be evaluated as necessary for the project. Please be sure to include that information in the budget narrative section of the project work plan, or this section may be reviewed less favorably. Now that your project narrative and project budget are complete, look at the evaluation criteria in Section 5A. For each evaluation criterion, compare your project narrative and project budget to the corresponding section. Be sure that there is a response for each identified evaluation criterion, and what you've included in your project narrative and budget is sufficient information to support good evaluation for each criterion. Under the Past Performance section, if your organization has never received a grant or an assistance agreement, please state that to receive half the points. If you skip or fail to provide any information for any evaluation criterion, you will get a 0 for that section. The table on this slide shows the point value of each evaluation section. I am going to say this again. It is very important that you read the criteria identified in Section 5A and provide sufficient detail in the narrative and budget for every item to be evaluated. Please refer to Section 4B of the RFA for detailed instructions for each required document listed on this slide. The required application documents are the SF-424, Application for Federal Assistance, the SF-424A for the budget information, EPA Form 5700-54, which is the key contacts for the project, EPA Form 4700-4, which is the pre-award compliance review. You must include the project narrative, which includes a summary information page, the work plan, detailed budget narrative, and maps. You may also include a budget table discussed on a prior slide. You must also include resumes or curriculum vitae of the principal investigators and critical staff. The negotiated indirect cost rate agreement is included if applicable, and letters of support for your partners. The exception on the negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, this is only included if you have a federally negotiated indirect cost rate. If you are not requesting indirect cost, or you are requesting the 10% federal de minimis, you will not have to submit this supporting document. So what is the selection process? Proposals are due as stated in the RFA on Monday, May 8, 2023. EPA first conducts a threshold eligibility review where each project is evaluated to make sure it's eligible. The threshold eligibility criteria can be found in Section 3D of the RFA. You will be notified if your project is deemed ineligible. If deemed ineligible, the project will not be reviewed further. EPA review committees will then score and rank all eligible proposals. EPA will notify applicants that were selected in early June of 2023. Unsuccessful applicants will also be notified at that time. Selected applicants are expected to submit a full funding package to EPA GMD office in August of 2023. After internal review, it will be submitted to the regional office for additional review and final award. Grant awards are expected sometime around October 2023, and then projects may begin. On this slide, you will find 2 links to additional helpful resources. The first is to GMD's Gulf of Mexico website, where you can find a link to the EJRFA webpage. On that page, you can find the links to the RFA itself, the question and answers, this presentation, a common errors document for assistance in filling out forms and other helpful links, including assistance in developing a budget. The second link is to www.epa.gov/grants, which is the EPA's grants webpage. This webpage provides additional resources for EPA grant applicants and recipients, including multiple trainings. Thank you for attending this webinar. GMD hopes it will be helpful as you begin planning your project. If you still have questions after listening to this presentation, reading the RFA, and reviewing both the Q&A and common errors documents, please email us at gmp-rfp@epa.gov. Thank you very much and have a great day.